All right, let's talk about sit stay today. If you haven't checked out our sit helping techniques and sequence video, you'll want to make sure you do that before you begin working on your sit stay. And there are a few really important rules we need to keep in mind when we're working on our dog's sit stay so that ultimately, in the long run, they'll have a great understanding of what the behavior actually is. So we want to make sure we are following through with our sequence of command, mark, release, reinforce. We want to make sure we're giving proper help if our dog needs it, and that can be just to get into the sit position. So it would be command, help if your dog needs help, then mark, release, reinforce. We also want to make sure that we are building our dog's understanding progressively. So we want to think about building up distance on our sit stay, maybe a step or two at a time. Building up duration, a few seconds at a time. Building up proximity to, come on in, building up proximity to distractions a couple of feet at a time. Think about progression here. Now we also want to make sure we follow through if our dog gets up before we've said their release word. So if they do, it's just going to be no, really matter of fact. You don't need to yell, you don't need to scream. Just kind of like, no, that was wrong, let's try it again. So if they get up before you said your release word, you're going to tell them no. You'll have them repeat the behavior. And then the other thing we want to keep in mind is where do we position ourselves as the handler when we release them. We always want to, if at all possible, get back in heel position, which is just where we want our dogs to walk. So it's the side that you would have your dog walk on. If for some reason you can't get back in heel position, at least go all the way back to in front of them when you release them. If you release from a distance, your dog will start anticipating that, and they'll start getting up when maybe you look at them or something like that. So let's take that out of the equation. Always return to your dog before you release them. Now, let's talk about our markers here. When you're working your sit stay, you kind of got a two component behavior here. You've got your initial sit position, which you can mark, and then you've got the stay component, which you can mark. So I'm going to try to demonstrate that with each repetition we do. So it would be sit, good girl, you would do your stay component, you would get back in heel position, mark it again, good girl, yes, whatever your marker is, and then you would release them. So what I'm going to do now is run through the progressions we do in our level 1 group class here at Dogtastic. And to break that down into pieces, we're going to start with something really small. We'll try to start with a pivot. If that's a little much for your dog, you can do just a little step. You don't even have to start with the full pivot. So basically, you want to think about breaking things down into pieces if you need to. So we'll start with that pivot. If that goes well, we'll add distance. Guess what? If the pivot doesn't go well, you need to work that pivot some more before you think about adding distance. So you got your pivot, you can check that one off, go on to do your distance. You can do distance, then think about adding distraction. Then you could think about dropping your leash, and you just build up from there. So for distractions in this video, we're going to use clapping our hands and stomping our feet. That's what we use for our level 1 test distraction, and that's because we can standardize it for test purposes. Start with this because you can control the enthusiasm. You could be really boring, you could be enthusiastic as your dog gets better at it, but also work on distractions that you're going to encounter in your daily life. So maybe somebody coming to the door, maybe dropping a piece of food on the floor, maybe have your dog sit stay while you're folding laundry. So think about some ways that you could actually use your sit stay within your daily life. All right, so to start with, we're going to do that pivot. Okay, I'm going to start on the sit, good girl, on the sit at my side. If your dog's not ready for that yet, feel free to start with the sit in front, and then you can just pivot to heel position. So when you're training with that release word, the stay component is implied. Personally, I don't use the word stay with my dogs. If you want to, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you're saying it once and you're not verbally repeating it to hold your dog in position. Also, make sure you're not putting a lot of pressure on your dog to hold them in position. Always keep in mind that stays are pointless if we have to verbally and or physically hold our dog in place. You're much better off letting them maybe make a mistake, telling them no, and having them repeat the behavior than you are teaching them you're going to hold them in place. Okay, so we got the sit at my side. I'm going to pivot in front and pivot back to your side and release. If she were to have gotten up, I would have just told her no. We would have repeated the behavior. So the pivot went well. We talked about progression. If your dog made a mistake on the pivot, try it again until they're doing great at it, and then you can add distance. Anna did well with that, so we're going to go ahead and add some distance. I'm going to try out to the end of my leash this time. Come here, girl. Sit. Good girl. So mark that initial sit position. We'll do our stay component. Come back and mark it again. Good girl. Free. And then you can release and treat. Remember, when you release your dog, they need to get up. It's not optional. Free means good job, you did it right, you're done. You got to get up, come to me, get your treat, get your toy. All right, the pivot went well, the distance went well. This time we're going to do distractions. Here you go, Anna. Come here. Sit. Good. So again, mark that initial behavior. Going to come out in front. Good. Good. Free. Good job. All right, so mark the different components of the behavior. Your marker says, good job. I like what you're doing. Keep doing it. So make sure you use that to your full advantage. All right, so distance went well. Now I'm going to try dropping my leash. Anna's done great with all of these progressions. It's a good indication that maybe she's ready for me to drop the leash. Okay, so we've got her on a sit. Going to drop the leash. We'll go out in front. You could also add more distractions in if you thought your dog was ready for that. Just like we mentioned earlier in the video, always return to your dog's side. Good girl. Free. Before you release them. Good job, sweetie. All right, guys, that's our progression for sit, stay. Make sure you start small and build your dog's understanding progressively. Be sure to follow through with your sequence. Command, mark, release, reinforce. If your dog needs help, comes immediately after the command. So it would be sit, help them get into the position if they need it. Then you'll mark it, use your stay component, go back to them, release, and reinforce. Always return to your dog's side to heel position before you release them. If for some reason you can't actually get into heel position, just go back to directly in front of them. But do not release your dog from a distance. They'll start anticipating that. They'll break that stay just to get up and come to you. So always go back to them before you release them. And then always make sure if they get up before you said your release word, you tell them no, you have them do the exercise again. So if we're on a sit stay here, and Anna walked over there, I'm going to tell her no as soon as she gets up. I'm going to get her and bring her right back here. Great time to use your leash even in your home. Just make sure you know where your dog's at and that they're not caught up on anything. But using your leash to work for obedience in your home is a great idea, especially if your dog is new to obedience. All right, I hope that helps you get started on your sit-stay work. As always, thanks for joining us and have a great day.